3,000 times. That is the exact expansion rate of methane gas the moment it escapes the crushing pressure of the deep ocean and hits the surface.
And $56 million is the exact amount BP was over budget before they even reached the most dangerous section of the Macondo well.
When that gas enters the riser, it doesn't just flow, it transforms the column of heavy drilling mud into a supersonic piston aimed directly at the rig floor.
But the real pressure wasn't just coming from the geology, it was coming from a corporate schedule that had become a loaded gun pointed at the crew.
On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon wasn't just an oil rig anymore. It was a pressure cooker, waiting for the smallest human error to trigger a catastrophe.
The Macondo prospect was supposed to be a triumph of engineering, but instead, it became the day accounting and speed killed 11 brave men.
Imagine drilling through 5,000 feet of water just to touch the mudline, and then pushing another 13,000 feet into the Earth's crust.
They were 43 days behind schedule, and in the offshore world, every single hour of delay is a massive bleed on the company's balance sheet.
The geological violence down there is hard to overstate. You are punching a hole into a reservoir that has been waiting millions of years to punch back.
And while the Earth was punching back with physics, the executives in Houston were punching back with demands to cut costs and save time.
The rock formations were inherently unstable, creating a narrow drilling margin where the slightest mistake in mud weight could cause a total collapse.
Just get it done became the unspoken mantra that overrode every safety protocol and every engineering warning on that rig.
They pushed the technology to its absolute physical limit, ignoring the fact that the equipment was never designed for this level of sustained stress.
The decision-making process became toxic, prioritizing the rental rate of the rig, $500,000 a day, over the lives of the people on board.
Let's look at the cement job, which was the first domino to fall in a cascade of failures that no one was willing to stop.
They chose nitrogen foam cement because it was the cheap and fast option, despite knowing it was notoriously difficult to stabilize in deep water.
Halliburton's own lab test proved the mixture was unstable. Yet that critical data was buried under a pile of paperwork and can-do attitudes.
They needed to unlatch that rig and move to the next project, and they were willing to gamble the integrity of the well to make it happen.
The cement slurry is literally the only thing standing between a productive well and a catastrophic blowout that can be seen from space.
But the bonus checks were the only thing driving the final decisions, leading them to use only 6 centralizers instead of the 21 required.
Without those centralizers, the pipe sits against the side of the hole, creating a massive gap in the cement seal for gas to exploit.
They didn't have the right parts on the rig, and instead of waiting 10 hours for a delivery, they chose to risk the entire operation.
The computer simulations literally predicted the seal would fail, but the engineers in charge decided to trust their luck instead of the math.
It was a good enough mentality applied to a high-pressure environment, where good enough is just another word for a death sentence.
Then we have the negative pressure test, the final diagnostic that should have stopped the disaster before it ever started.
The pressure inside the pipe shot up to 1,400 psi, which is a loud, screaming signal that the well is leaking and the reservoir is winning.
Instead of calling a halt, they invented a fantasy called the bladder effect to explain away a reading that they simply didn't want to believe.
There is no such thing as a bladder effect in fluid physics. It was a collective delusion designed to keep the project moving forward at all costs.
They chose to believe a secondary test that showed zero pressure, cherry-picking the data that allowed them to keep their heads in the sand.
That was the moment they signed the death warrant for the crew, declaring the well secure when it was actually a ticking time bomb.
By replacing the heavy drilling mud with seawater, they removed the only physical weight holding back the massive pressure of the Earth.
Thermodynamics doesn't care about your project management software or your quarterly earnings. It only cares about the path of least resistance.
The gas snuck past the sensors, dissolved in the oil-based mud, and waited until it was too high in the riser to be contained by any valve.
At 9:56 p.m., the horizon didn't just turn orange. It became a funeral pyre for the 11 men who never had a chance to say goodbye.
All of this because of a few missing centralizers and a culture that valued the clock more than the lives of the workers.
From the silent depths of the seabed to the loud chaos of the courtroom, we are going to dissect every single mistake that led to this fire.
This isn't just a story about a rig that exploded. It's a story about what happens when arrogance meets the unstoppable laws of physics.
This is Kinetic Fall, and today, we are breaking down the anatomy of the Deepwater Horizon disaster.
To understand why the Macondo well failed, you have to understand the violence of the environment. We aren't talking about digging a hole in your backyard. We are talking about drilling through 5,000 feet of water and then another 13,000 feet of geological hostility. The rock formation at the bottom of the Macondo well was a nightmare scenario of narrow drilling margins. The pore pressure, the pressure of the fluids inside the rock, was nearly identical to the fracture gradient, the pressure required to break the rock. It's like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster. If your drilling mud is too heavy, you fracture the rock and lose circulation, destroying the well. If it's too light, the gas pushes in and kills you. This delicate balance forced BP into a corner. They couldn't use the standard heavy, reliable cement. It would have crushed the formation. So, they chose nitrogen-foamed cement. It's a chemistry experiment injected into the Earth's crust. It relies on a perfect mixture of nitrogen gas and cement slurry to remain stable. Halliburton, the contractor, ran lab tests on the specific slurry mixture BP planned to use. The result? Unstable. The solids were settling out. It wouldn't hold a seat. Halliburton sent the report to BP and BP filed it away. They moved forward with a cement design that physics had already rejected.
Mark calls it a chemistry experiment. I call it criminal negligence disguised as efficiency. The decision to use that specific cement mixture wasn't made in a vacuum. It was made under the crushing weight of a $1 million per day burn rate. The Deepwater Horizon was 43 days behind schedule. In the oil and gas world, 43 days is an eternity. It's tens of millions of dollars in cost overruns. The company man, BP's representative on the rig, was under immense pressure from Houston to wrap it up. Every decision made in the final 24 hours of the rig's life was biased toward speed. When they decided to use only 6 centralizers instead of the recommended 21, it wasn't an engineering decision. It was a logistics decision. They didn't have the extra centralizers on board. Getting them flown out would take 10 hours. 10 hours of downtime cost approximately $200,000, so they gambled the lives of 126 crew members to save $200,000. That is the calculus of disaster. They valued the schedule more than the seal.
And because they skipped those centralizers, the casing pipe wasn't centered in the hole. It was lying against the side of the rock formation. When you pump cement around a pipe that is touching the wall, the cement doesn't go all the way around. It leaves a gap, a channel of mud. That channel is a highway for gas. But even with a bad cement job, they had a chance to catch it. The negative pressure test. This is the single most critical safety diagnostic in drilling. You reduce the pressure inside the pipe to 0. If the pressure stays at 0, the well is sealed. If it climbs, the well is leaking. They ran the test. The pressure on the drill pipe shot up to 1,400 psi. That is a massive, undeniable leak. It means the reservoir is communicating with the rig. It is a red flashing light screaming stop, but the crew on the floor, guided by the BP leads, rationalized it away. They came up with the bladder effect, a theory that the heavy mud in the riser was exerting pressure on the sensor. It was junk science. It doesn't exist, but it was the answer they wanted, so they accepted it.
The bladder effect. It sounds technical, doesn't it? It sounds plausible to a tired crew at the end of a shift, but it was a fabrication, a collective delusion. This is what we call normalization of deviance. You ignore a warning sign once, and nothing happens. You ignore it twice, and nothing happens. Eventually, the warning sign looks like a false alarm. The crew ignored the 1,400 psi reading because they were fixated on a neck test. Second test they ran on the kill line, which showed 0 pressure. They cherry-picked the data that supported the all clear and discarded the data that screamed danger. Why? Because a failed negative pressure test meant pausing operations. It meant remedial cement jobs. It meant days, maybe weeks, of delay. Nobody wanted to be the guy who called Houston to say, "We aren't finishing today." The hierarchy on that rig was broken. Transocean, the rig owner, deferred to BP, the operator, and Halliburton, the contractor, just did what they were told. No one had the authority or the courage to pull the brake.
Once they accepted the bad test, they displaced the mud with seawater. The hydrostatic barrier was gone. The gas, methane mostly, entered the wellbore through the failed cement channel. As it rose, it expanded. Methane expands exponentially as pressure decreases. By the time it hit the riser pipe leading up to the rig, it was moving at supersonic speeds. The rig floor didn't know until the mud started spewing 240 feet into the air. At that point, there is only one line of defense left: the blowout preventer, BOP, a 5-story tall, 300-ton stack of valves sitting on the ocean floor. It has a blind shear ram, massive hardened steel blades designed to cut through the drill pipe and seal the well shut. It is the ultimate failsafe. The crew hit the button. The emergency disconnect sequence, EDS. It should have worked, but the pipe inside the BOP wasn't centered because of the flow of gas. It had buckled. The shear rams fired, but they couldn't cut through the tool joint, the thickest part of the pipe. And even if they could, one of the control pods had a dead battery and a solenoid valve was wired incorrectly. The failsafe was a mechanical corpse. The gas hit the engine room. The engines revved uncontrollably as they ingested the methane, and the rig turned into a bomb.
The explosion of the Deepwater Horizon wasn't an accident. It was a crime scene spread over 68,000 square miles of ocean. The aftermath revealed a corporate culture that had rotted from the inside out. In the years following the disaster, the legal battle stripped away the accident narrative and revealed the gross negligence. That is a specific legal term. It means BP didn't just make a mistake. They acted with a reckless disregard for the safety of others. The federal judge ruled that BP was primarily responsible, assigning them 67% of the blame, while Transocean took 30% and Halliburton 3%. The total cost to BP, over $65 billion. That includes criminal fines, cleanup costs, and settlements. It is the largest corporate settlement in history. But let's look at the human accountability. Manslaughter charges were filed against the 2 BP well site leaders who misinterpreted the negative pressure test, but those charges were eventually dropped or reduced to misdemeanors. The executives who created the culture of speed over safety faced 0 prison time. The company paid the check, but the individuals walked away.
From an engineering standpoint, the legacy of Macondo is a complete rewrite of Deepwater protocols. The industry realized that their fail-safes were theoretical, not practical. We saw the creation of the BSEE, Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, splitting the regulators who collect revenue from the regulators who enforce safety. You can no longer have the fox guarding the henhouse. The blowout preventer, once treated as a piece of furniture you install and forget, is now subject to rigorous, third-party certification. We now require double shear rams, 2 sets of blades instead of 1, to ensure that even if a tool joint is in the way, the well can be cut. Real-time monitoring is now standard. Data from the rig floor is beamed instantly to onshore centers, where independent engineers watch the pressure curves. If they see a 1,400 psi spike, they don't have the social pressure of the rig floor. They can call the stop. The engineering denial that allowed the bladder effect to exist has been replaced by a paranoid adherence to physics.
But has the culture really changed, or have we just added more paperwork? The drive for profit is still the engine of the industry. The price of oil still dictates the pace of drilling. The tragedy of the Deepwater Horizon is that 11 men died. Not because we lacked the technology to drill safely, but because we lacked the integrity to use it. The financial payout was massive. Yes, $65 billion is a staggering number, but for a company the size of BP, it was survivable. They sold assets, they cut dividends, and they kept drilling. The true verdict isn't in the courtroom, it's in the quiet realization that safety is often just a line item until something explodes. The families of the 11 men, Jason Anderson, Aaron Dale, Birkin, Donald Clark, Stephen Ray, Curtis, Gordon Jones, Roy Wyatt, Kemp, Carl Kleppinger, Keith Blair, Manuel Dewey, Rivette, Shane Roshto, and Adam Weiss, they don't care about the new BSEE regulations or the double shear rams. They care that their fathers and husbands were sacrificed on the altar of a quarterly earnings report.
Technically, we learned that you cannot cheat the hydrostatic pressure. The Macondo well proved that nature inevitably finds the weak point in your design. Whether it's a porous cement job, a dead battery in a control pod, or a tired crew member staring at a monitor, the failure will find a way through. The capping stack that finally stopped the oil flow after 87 days, a massive piece of hardware lowered onto the BOP, is now required to be on standby for every deepwater operation. We have containment systems ready to deploy in hours, not months. The engineering has evolved. We have built better cages for the beast, but the beast is still there. The pressure at 18,000 feet hasn't changed. The volatility of methane hasn't changed. The only variable that remains unpredictable is the human element. The arrogance to think we can conquer the geology without respecting it.
Kinetic Fall isn't just about looking at explosions, it's about looking at the receipts. The Deepwater Horizon is the ultimate case study in penny-wise, pound-foolish. They tried to save $200,000 on centralizers and lost $65 billion. They tried to save 10 hours of rig time and lost the entire rig. It is the most expensive business decision ever made, and it serves as a permanent, burning reminder. If you think safety is expensive, try an accident. The verdict is clear. The system failed because it was designed to maximize profit, not survival, and until that priority shifts, the next Macondo is just waiting for the next negative pressure test to be ignored.
Physics doesn't care about your stock price,
And the market doesn't care about your life.
This was Kinetic Fall.
Stay safe.